Let's bring the lights up a bit because I want to engage this more as a conversation with the audience now, and we have mics in the aisles, as you can see. And what you may or may not know is there's a huge gathering also watching us, audience, are being with us online. And I'd like to take the first question from the online community. Do you have that question?
Yes, I do.
Great.
The online community is asked. Professor Eunice spoke about how the banking system is broken and that it doesn't work or exist for 2/3 of the world's population. Is it that the global education system is broken or simply not available to enough people?
Who would like to pick that up? One of us has to answer it. Wendy?
I am not the most qualified to answer. I could take a crack at it. As was indicated, there are about 75 million children around the world who are not enrolled in school, about 101 who are not attending school. So some are enrolled but actually not going for various reasons. But those numbers have improved significantly. There are more children today in school than there ever have been around the world. And as Greg says about Afghanistan, we need to celebrate those successes while recognizing that much more remains to be done. We are also seeing very good improvements, but we're not there yet, in girls being in school. I think one of the challenges in the developing world, as it is in the developed world, as Wendy has talked about and the father has talked about, is the quality of education also deserves attention. So the Millennium Development Goal talks about the percentage and number of children in school, but around the world, the issue of quality education has to also be addressed. And I think, certainly a number of people on this panel are very engaged in that issue as well.
Thank you. Question?
Yes, I have a question, I guess that's appropriate to Teach for America. What can we do as a society in this country to encourage more of the best and brightest of our high school and college students to want to pursue a career as a teacher without having the experiment of Teach for America to learn from? My daughter went to Georgetown. She always knew she wanted to be a public school teacher. She's teaching in East Harlem right now, but she felt very little support along the way in terms of her day-to-day educational experience. And so we raise kids to want to be lawyers and doctors. Why can't we raise kids to want to be teachers?
It's a wonderful question. I'm just going to gratefully thank you for helping me recognize the people there. I'm coming to you. Let's keep our questions short, please, so we can get as many of them as possible. So, Wendy, I think you should take that question.
I mean, I think it's a great question. And I guess I would say, first of all, we believe, we have a crisis in our country. When we have 13 million kids growing up below the poverty line, half of whom will not graduate from high school, the half who do will have an 8th grade skill level. This is a crisis. 1 out of 10 of those kids will graduate from college. And I guess what we've come to believe is that crises demand out-of-the-box solutions. And we know that we won't fully solve that problem through more people teaching, going above and beyond from within their classrooms. Ultimately, we need to reach the point where we have people at every level of our education system, at every level of policy, across all of our sectors, who know what you know after you've taught successfully in a low-income community, which is that we can solve this problem, and who have a very grounded understanding of how to solve it so that we can affect the fundamental changes necessary to actually truly solve it, including the fundamental changes around how do we attract and sustain high-quality teachers. We've got a commission of some of the most successful of our alums who have made the choice to stay in the classroom. About 33% of our overall alums right now are still teaching. And I think they're coming up with a new vision of the teaching profession that will in fact succeed in both attracting and retaining high-performing folks longer. And really they just looked at the data and they looked at and reflected on their own experiences, and they realized most people leave teaching between years 3 and 8. So the real question is, how do we keep them in? And we think we need to, and they think, I should say, that we need to invest hugely in in all of the things that you would need to invest in, from compensation to the status, et cetera, of retaining the high-performing beginning teachers into their third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh year. Their theory is once you've made it to year 7, we may have them for life, and if we don't, then that's 7 great years of successful teaching.
Let's go over here for a question.
My question is for Congressman Holt. I wanted to ask you about our domestic public school system and about growing up in a low-income neighborhood, attending an underperforming public school, and then entering the job market unprepared. It seems like a vicious poverty cycle dependent upon which zip code a student lives in the U.S. And I just want to know if you see an appetite in Congress to reform our system where 70% of a school's revenue comes from the property taxes of the neighborhood in which it's located.
Very good question, Congressman.
The point is there's enormous variation from state to state, from county to county, from town to town. In New Jersey, we have more than 600 school districts. That's more school districts than there are towns. And they each have responsibility for hiring, for curriculum, and in fact, we have school board elections over the next week. And they all fight over this and fiercely defend this decentralized system. Other states have county-wide systems or even statewide systems. There's such enormous variation. It is unlikely that from Washington we will be able to impose any order or particular or unified structure on all this. We are moving toward, I think, greater attention at a national level with national standards for teacher professional development, for example, which, some years ago I served on what was known as the Glenn Commission, the National Commission on the Teaching of Math and Science, chaired by John Glenn. We realized that the focus should be on the teacher, more than the curriculum, more than the length of the school year. I mean, all of these other things that we could pay attention to. We should first focus on the teacher. And part of the problem comes back to this earlier question. In fact, I wanted to turn to Greg because I gather from his book, in these villages in remote towns, the teacher, when they find one and bring them into the new school, is held in very high regard. We've all heard about, if we haven't seen directly, in other countries where the parents scurry around the house cleaning up and bringing out their best things because the teacher is coming over to visit. I mean, do Americans clean up if the teacher comes over? Do they even invite the teacher over? How do we get to the state of affairs in rural, that exists evidently in rural Pakistan, where the teacher is held in such high regard?
You can answer.
I think one thing I've learned, a lot of things, I go talk to a lot of schools, like last year about 230 schools in the U.S., from kindergarten to the Air Force Academy. So I asked kids, how many of you have talked in great detail to your grandparents about World War II or the Depression or Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, or when your grandparents came from the country? And the average in the U.S. is about 10%. Doesn't matter whether it's public, private, urban, or rural. Now, if I ask the same question in Africa or Pakistan, Afghanistan, about 90% of the hands come up. And I think it's a great tragedy in our country. We've lost the tradition where we can learn from our elders. And part of that is our tradition about respect for education, which our grandparents had more than we do. And so in our schools, one thing we do is we have the elders come in 2 or 3 times a week and talk to the children in those countries, because I think that's such a thing. And respect for elders, and I think that could maybe tie into respect for teachers. And then also the bottom line is teachers' pay. I mean, it's kind of the basic thing of teacher pay. And one reason the teachers are respected in the community is because the teachers are making, pretty good money.
And certainly everyone on this panel has been lobbying for that.